book is so cool because so many different trainings and books that you read and ideas and whatever are like a
We
branch.
want to, purchase a home. We know why we want to, but then, the what to do, that becomes more clear. And it's just like any of those paradigm shifts, it's almost been like you figured out one, whereas you already had the other. And it just kind of connects. And it's like, okay, now I get it. I truly get it. It's interesting.
All right.
Sweet.
So today it is just us, and we are just going to be doing kind of a quick overview on the paradigms and principles chapter. So the first part of this book says that a habit is an intersection of knowledge, skill, and desire. I thought that was super insightful. I don't think you can have a habit without knowledge. You definitely can't do something without skill, but I think what drives you the most is desire to kind of get that task accomplished or start that new habit. What were your thoughts on that?
He has a chart in the book, and it kind of shows it's like a circle. It's three circles, and they kind of overlap, and it kind of represents what you just said visually really well. And it's like, okay, well, if you really think about it, yeah, you can have the knowledge and the skill. If you don't have the desire, you're never going to do it. Also, if you have the knowledge and the desire, I mean, you're probably going to do a bit of it, but you're just not going to know how to. And then if you have the skill and the desire, it's like, okay, well, you're going to do it, but then are you even doing it right?
Right.
So it's like, I don't know, it's kind of like that happy medium between it. But yeah, no, that quote, that was the reason I grabbed my book, because I was like, no, Lauren, I got to talk about that. So, but it's interesting because right after that, he even talks about how knowledge is the theoretical paradigm, the what to do and the why. And it's like, it's funny because Lexi and I tried to challenge us to kind of think of, the most recent like paradigm shifts or, epiphanies that we've had recently, and like why. Why did it happen? And so the last few that we could think of, it was, we either already knew what to do, but didn't know why. And then now the why became very clear, or a why was clear, like, oh, well, we want to, purchase a home. We know why we want to, but then, the what to do, that becomes more clear. And it's just like any of those paradigm shifts, it's almost been like you figured out one, whereas you already had the other. And it just kind of connects. And it's like, okay, now I get it. I truly get it. It's interesting.
I kind of felt the same way. So as a realtor, you hear all the time, get on the phone and make your calls, get on the phone and make your calls, get on the phone and make your calls. And I say that consistently as a mentor and somebody who coaches other realtors and helps them grow their business. And I consistently get pushback. Well, I don't know who to call. I don't know what to say. And it was like, this kind of gave me actual talking points on trying to help them get through that. Well, hey, listen, you've got to make the phone calls, right? But you don't always know what to say. So there's the knowledge part. Like there's kind of that missing bubble in that conversation that I have with people that I coach. They have the desire to make money. I don't think that's ever lacking, right? They have the desire to get out there and to help people buy and sell houses and help themselves financially get ahead. It's kind of a double-edged sword, right? You get to help people and help yourself at the same time, but then they feel like they don't have the skill, right? They don't know what to say. They don't know how to say it. And so I think that this right here is just a great breakdown of the pieces that they're missing. Because I think that knowing the piece that you're missing will help you. You don't know what you don't know, right? And if you don't know that you're missing the skill part, well, then you feel like a failure. But if you know you're missing the skill part and you're trying to create a new habit, all of a sudden you're like, oh, I know what piece of the puzzle I'm missing. Let me fix that. Or if it's, I don't have the desire, I really am not driven by helping people, or I'm really not driven by, putting that check in the bank every month, then maybe you've got to get something else driving you to kind of achieve that happiness. Something else that they kind of pointed out is, they really talked about dependence, interdependence, and independence again in this little section, obviously reviewing chapter 1. He made the comment that all of nature is interdependent. And I was like, hello, aha moment, because he talks about maximum ability to achieve comes in the interdependence layer of perfecting something. And
Right.
so when I was kind of listening to the book and he started talking about that, it was like, oh, what a massive aha. You are 100% right. Nature functions harmoniously in a big circle and is completely independent. And it was like, oh my gosh, why am I not doing that in every aspect of my life? Because when
Hmm.
you're interdependent, that circle's complete. There's no gaps in that whatever habit or whatever moment you're trying to complete in your life. And it was like, whoa, that is super, super eye-opening. Did you have any feedback on that part and just kind of listening to or reading about nature being completely independent or having interdependence on other parts of nature? All right, guys, thanks for joining me today. Today we are starting a new book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which I'm super excited about. And we are kind of going over part 1, paradigm and principles. And in this chapter, we talked a lot about being dependent, what that meant, being independent, what that meant, and being interdependent and kind of what that meant. So as we start, do you guys want to kind of go over and just any ahas or any takeaways from that chapter and what those 3 things mean and kind of maybe mean to you? David, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so, interdependence for me was really kind of a new concept. Dependence, independence, have an idea of what it is. I've understood it over the years. And then even the shift from dependence to independence makes sense. Interdependence, I'm not going to lie. So when I first read about it, I kind of figured he was going to talk more about it in the book. And actually, that one kind of excited me the most, just to kind of get an idea of what interdependence truly is and how to be it. So interdependence was almost kind of just like this new thing. I was just excited to really learn about it.
I had never really thought about how that played a role in my life either in progression of becoming efficient, I guess. Abigail, how about you? What was kind of your takeaway for this chapter?
For me, I realized that, like I said, I feel that I'm too independent in certain areas and too dependent in certain areas. So I think being able to have that mind shift, like they talked about, being able to then see what you need to be more independent on and then shift it into, something else was really cool. I really loved the fact that it, just like the other book that we read, it's opening up my eyes to more and helping me realize things that I either need to change or that I need to just have a shift in. So I want to my notes so I can read them at the same time. Yeah, I think that was pretty much it. I think the biggest thing is making sure that you're looking at yourself. And that's what I like the most, is that you're taking self-reflection and then starting from that point. Because I think when you are looking to become extremely successful, you have to be able to look inward first before you can start actually doing the things, creating those goals for yourself.
Awesome. Yeah, no, for me, it was very eye-opening because I started looking at my life from infancy to business owner and how the progression happened. When you're dependent, you're in an infancy stage of that part of your life. And it doesn't mean you're an infant, right? But you're in infancy stage of learning something new is kind of how I related that to things. And, if you look at it from a business perspective, when I first started selling real estate, I was super dependent. I was dependent on my office telling me how to run my business, how to get clients, how to become productive in the realm of the real estate world. And then at some point, I don't think I realized when I shifted from being dependent to independent on people, but that shift took place. And as it shifted, it was like, oh, all of a sudden I found that my team meetings and the things that I was using to become more successful at the task became non-valuable, because I think that a lot of the times the things that I was finding were the same every week, right? Our team meetings were giving the same data. And so I started looking in other places and becoming much more independent on growing my business. Now, where I think life changed was when I learned to become interdependent.
So we are reading 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Getting into it really in this chapter, really as we're reading about kind of the social mirror. He talks of responsibility, or what he calls responsibility, the freedom to choose between stimulus and response, which I think is huge. Act or be acted upon, the power of language, circle of concern and circle of influence, haves and the bees, making the commitment, making and keeping commitments. And then there's a section as well, depending on which version you have, kind of new insights on habit one as and so just as a sum, reading this chapter before we really dive into, did this cause any paradigm shift for anybody kind of using the terminology he does?
Yes, it did. So can I tell you, I got an entire divorce because I used to tell my ex that I was a reactive person. And if he would stop being an asshole, I would stop reacting like an asshole. And after I finished that chapter, I realized I was the asshole. So there's that.
Yeah.
There's that. And I realized being proactive in the first chapter, maybe I don't have the ability to dictate my first reaction, what my brain goes internal, but I do have the ability to dictate my second reaction. And that's where you can be proactive in everything that you're doing. So I still am glad I got divorced.
Throwing up the filter to keep you don't want coming out of your mouth to come out of your mouth.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. Not that I'm sad I got my divorce. I just wish I'd have used a different.
I completely agree with you, though. I tend to blame everything on me being reactive to what the emotions are, and then sitting back and kind of thinking over things afterward. I probably should have looked at it from a different point of view, because then it's how my actions are affecting the situation. So I love.
Steve, what about?
This is like one of those classic, it's better. I mean, it's easier said than done things. I mean, we know this all the time. I mean, it's like with my kids, we try and teach them all the time. It's like, crap's going to happen to you when you get out in the world.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's how you deal with it. That fact that crap's going to happen to you, crap's going to happen. Everybody's going to be sitting in the poop shower at some point. You're going to get crapped on. You know what I mean? It is what it is. How do you live with it? But it's funny because reading about some of the proactive language versus the reactive language, it made me realize, all right, okay, as much as I like to think I'm there, it's like, crap, I do use a little bit of that reactive language versus the proactive language,
Right.
So it's cool because coming the habits, this is a cool book because it shines a light on what we think we know, but it's like, you really it's going to call us to bring it to front of mind and really pay attention to it. So it's huge though, especially in real estate. There's so much that we don't, and it's how we react to it. That depends, will you be around?
Right. It's interesting because kind of to you guys' point, it's almost when you turn on a light or you check under the couch or you check under the bed and it's like, well, I thought everything was good, but now you're seeing all, you kind of bringing things, and it's almost bringing the awareness piece in. It's like, okay, well, now it can be a bit of a hard pill to swallow, at least for some of these things. And so I guess he kind of talks through almost some ways to kind of get there, and kind of talking through the language and talking, for instance, freedom of choice. He kind of talks about freedom of choice, kind of puts a different perspective. So you have your response and then you have your reaction. And it's like the space in between is where your freedom lies. And so I don't know if you guys remember the example that he used, but he talked about, I think, someone that was in like a prison or something similar of that. And, one of the guys, all he did was just change the way he reacted to anything that came his way. And he found a sense of, so I don't know if you guys have any examples of maybe a time.
Hey guys, thank you so much for joining us again today for our book club, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. We are going over, oh my God, Steve, you're amazing. Look at those Vanna Whites on my team, right? I love it. And we are talking about the second highly effective habit, which is begin with the end in mind. And since this is Davin's book, Davin will lead the conversation. And I believe we're down one today. So it's just the 3 of us. I have not heard from Abigail. Hopefully she'll join us next week. Anyway, Davin, take it away. What a chapter.
Yes, it's a really good chapter here. So kind of a quick recap at a really high level. So begin with the end in mind. Some of the things we talked about is, all things are created twice. Leadership versus management, which honestly I think is huge. Identifying your center and kind of the concept principle-based center. He talks about mission statements, so family, organization, personal, so on, and then using your whole brain, the left and the right side. Diving into this, one question I have is, why is the mental creation so important for effectiveness in the workplace? So as he talks about all things being created twice, that first creation, that mental creation, what's the power behind that? What's you guys' thought as he kind of talks through that?
From a real estate perspective or from any job perspective, or?
From a real estate perspective would be good to start with, honestly.
I mean, so for me, like, because I was with a team before I went solo and then jumped into EXP about a year ago. So I've been solo for 2 years and have aspirations of growth to bring people in as coordinators and eventually have team members and whatever. And I have aspirations of that growth, but I can't get to where I want to go without having a roadmap and without laying out everything. Can you get there? Yes. You will stumble and hit your foot a lot and hit your head a lot and whatever by not going down all the right streets. But if you can set yourself up check marks along the way, say I need to be here, to be here, to be here, to be here, to be here. And you almost have to go backwards. I think that's a Dan Beer thing that he talks about is, at the beginning with the end in mind is, where do I want to be? Like, he's going to, like we talked about earlier, he's going to be at $1 billion, his team this year. You don't just get to $1 billion and say, well, let's just hire some people and we'll get to $1 billion. It's like, to get there, you got to have a playbook this big, but there's a map to get there. Like for me in this, the other thing is, I mean, it's a business, and some people don't treat it like a business. And those are the ones that are out in the first 5 years. And it is a business. And the only way to go forward is to treat it like a business and have a plan to go forward.
Right.
That's kind of how I look at it.
Right. For me, it is a much quicker trajectory to get there. If you've got a roadmap, I come from the personality of think then do, and there's an A and a Z and there's very little in between. And I think, I have learned over the years, and this book kind of solidified all of that. If you stop, and to your point, Steve, create a roadmap, right, on how you're going to get there, then at the end of the day, when you get to the end, it looks the way or very close to the way you expected it to. If you don't start on that pre-planning, when you get to the end, it's not nearly what your hopes and dreams were. There's a lot of times there's a lot of disappointment on the front end. And so, they talk a little bit about, mission statements and that kind of stuff. And I always say that when I'm laying on my deathbed, I want to have affected 1 million people in a positive manner. And so when I came up with that about 10 years ago, there was a platform. Okay, how many people, if I'm working with one scout, how many people is that actually touching, right? It's usually their parents, possibly their grandparents, possibly their siblings. So a lot of times one scout equals 4. Same thing when I greet somebody at church, right? How do I have a positive impact on Sunday morning? I've got 500 kids coming through up street at church. Well, listen, every morning, every little girl that passes me, it's a good morning, beautiful. You look stunning today. Every little boy, what a great way for those parents and those kids to start their Sunday morning, the beginning of their week with just an excited, happy grin to see you that, that you're there. And we're excited that you're learning about Jesus or whatever. And work, I kind of have a way to measure that. And so when you start with the beginning in mind and you really lay that roadmap out, I think 1, you actually see the fruits of your labor that you hope to see at the end. And 2, I think you get there faster, right? If you understand where you're going, like if I just get in my car today and say, I'm going to go to Texas, well, I know I have to drive west, but that's all I know. I'm going to get there a lot faster if I plan a little bit and really think about it. And I'll get there even faster if I, get on a plane as opposed to getting in a car if I really think through that plan. So for me, it's just an eye-opening moment that yes, when you stop and you plan and you know what the end result looks like, then at that point you get there faster and it's what you're expecting. It's, a vision, the picture of future success, right? That's beginning. Exactly. Having a vision is starting with the end in mind. And I teach that, right? I teach a whole course on what a vision is and why it's important.
Exactly.
As realtors, our problem is that we're all, I playfully say, we're narcissists. We're all running around with our like chickens with our heads cut off. And like, that's progress, that's like, oh, we're busy. That means something. And so a lot of people won't stop. Like sometimes you have to stop and say, I'm going to take 2 days to sit over here.
Right.
And come up with a game plan. Like in October, you've got to come up with a game plan for what 2023 is going to look like. Some agents will just tell you, you're missing 2 days of calling expireds and withdrawals, right? Or whatever. It's like you could be plowing forward. It's like, but sometimes you have to stop. And a lot of, that's probably not just true in real estate, but since we're in there, it's true of real estate agents. Sometimes we mistake busyness for progress.
Yes. Yeah. And I think one thing too that, in this book, he really kind of nails really well.
All right. So today we are doing the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And we are working on habit 3 today. First things first, principles of personal management. I think it should just be learn how to time block. I think that's a chapter.
4 quadrants.
Yes. I think I live in quadrant 4.
We're in quadrant 1.
That's where I should live.
quadrant 1 and quadrant
No, we
3.
should be in 2.
2 is where we should live.
Right.
But that's the problem. We're in 1 because we spend too much time in 4. Is
Right.
what the problem is.
So anyway, all right, David, since this is your book, I will let you go ahead and lead the
Absolutely.
questions and the conversation.
This one's really good one. So we kind of talk about the power of independent will. He introduces the concept of the generations of time management. He also introduces the time management matrix, which every time I look at it, I feel like I have a new paradigm. So that's the 4 different quadrants. Then he talks about transitioning into quadrant 2, saying no by having a bigger yes. And he really kind of breaks that down, almost gives like a roadmap in a sense throughout the chapter. He also talks about 4th generation time management tools. And then we talk about delegation and aligning incentives for production and production capability. And then we talk about what he calls the urgency addiction. So we'll kind of dive into those for this discussion. So first question I have, so Covey kind of says his maxim of personal effectiveness is manage from the left and lead from the right. What exactly does he mean by this?
Like lead from the left and manage from the right?
Yes. Manage from the left, lead from the right.
But you're talking size of the brain, right?
Correct.
Because the right's the artsy-fartsy part of the brain, right?
Yep. Because leadership is kind of that,
Right.
that creative side where management is a little more about the numbers, which for time management, Covey also calls it a misnomer. Why does he call it a misnomer? Do you guys have any idea on that one? Like why he calls time management a misnomer and really why it matters?
It's us that needs the management. It's not the time. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Because
exactly.
We all are probably guilty of, we got to work on time management, this and that. But I can guarantee you there's at least 4 hours of my day that if you'd smack me upside the head and send me back to work, that time would have gotten away. So it's us, and that's where the problem is. The time takes care of itself, especially if you're not finding it. The time will walk out the door.
And I agree with Steve because kind of towards the end of the chapter where he starts talking about your schedule shouldn't manage you. It should be a tool for you to accomplish things that you need to do, but it should not be a prison or something that's holding you back or something that's stopping you. It should be something that is complementing everything else you're trying to get done in your life. And so I think that goes on with don't let your calendar control you. You control your calendar for productivity.
Right. Yeah. So the quote that I really like out of that one where he's saying, the challenge is not to manage time, manage ourselves. So Steve, exactly what you were saying. And then
that's something that you deal with. There've been some other books that have been like that recently it's all about us. It's all about that guy in the mirror.
Right.
If that guy in the mirror, he's my worst employee. You know what I mean? And if I could get the guy in the mirror to get his head out of his butt, I think we could do some stuff. You know what I mean?
Right.
But it's always keeping that in focus. I need to work better. We all do, but we got to keep that in focus.
Sure.
Too.
Right.
I also, we all have that person that we're chasing. We all have that person in our crosshairs that we're going after and whatever. And when I get mad, I think about that person. And the reality is I'm not competing with that person. I'm competing with myself.
Right.
I have to beat me from yesterday.
Right.
It doesn't matter what they do. They're running their own race.
Right. One question I want to ask you guys, because I feel like I got a little embarrassed as I was reading through it, talking about the time management matrix, like 4 different quadrants. For me, as I was reading, I think he gave a couple of examples of, different activities that would be in each. And as I read the examples from quadrant 4, I feel like, I kind of blushed a little. It's just like, I kind of fall into this trap quite a bit. And it's, I don't know, as you guys were kind of reading that, were you kind of noticing, what were your thoughts? Like, did you have any kind of paradigm shifts? I feel like that's kind of the biggest one of, Steve, like you're actually saying, maybe I am my biggest, my worst employee.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we are here today for Habit 4. Being awesome. Being
integrity first, win-win or there's no deal.
Anyway, all right, David, we will let you lead the conversation if you want to hop right in. And I love your hair, by the way. I really do like it. I think you should wear it.
Thank you very much. Hey, awesome. So jumping into the paradigms of interdependence. Interdependence, I think that one's kind of awesome. So when we go to the emotional bank account, what were you guys' thoughts on the emotional bank account? Was it kind of weird reading through it, or was it kind of, I don't know, for me, it was kind of interesting. It almost kind of created a different view on how to effectively work with, and it really kind of talks about that emotional bank account. I kind of hear you guys talk about this all the time, when you're going to a brokerage or whatever, how are they adding value? Those are those deposits into the bank account. And it's just like, you really think about it, the folks that are leaving have those negative bank balances. And it's like, maybe if they had a positive balance, maybe they would have stayed, maybe they would have done really well. So what would you guys' thoughts as reading through the emotional bank?
So for me, that was a huge aha in the book. I love the definition, first off. Like I've always been cognizant, I think, of how my actions make somebody else react, or how my word or my communication skills make somebody act or react. But for me, like this particular chapter and that conversation, the chapter brought me back to my divorce. It was like, good God, if we could have found a way in our marriage to deposit positive into that emotional bank account, would I've even gotten divorced, right? My ex-husband's not a bad person. We just came to a point in our marriage and in our relationship where being right was more important than being together. And so I think that, for me, like as I read through this, it just kind of gave that aha a definition. Because since I've moved past that marriage, and since I've studied lots of different things, taken lots of courses, taken lots of classes, read lots of books, my ability to communicate and my understanding that if you say, I'm sorry, but that empties that emotional bank account, right? And I think you can utilize that in your business. I think you can utilize that, take today, for example. The house I showed was unlisted. It was on market last week. Client was out of town, called somebody on Monday, said, hey, listen, please let us see your house. They let us in today, and they were just so frustrated with the market and with their agent. And as I walked through the home, I just said, oh, listen, let's next time you list, do this, 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 and this. And they were like, oh my goodness. And I just think that, maybe their house wouldn't have sold if I had it listed, but I don't think they'd have been frustrated at the end, because I think they would have understood, by taking time to deposit into those things, it builds trust, it builds relationships. And to me, making deposits into an emotional bank account is going to keep relationships together. And that's what helps those relationships fare the bad weather. And in business, like that's what matters, right? When your client's house doesn't sell, I just tell a client this past week, she had her house listed for, way more than what it should have been listed for. She called me, she's like, my house is not selling. I'm like, yeah, I know. So she let that realtor go. She hired me, and I talked her into dropping her price $40,000. Like that's a major price decrease after only 2 weeks of being on the market. And why I was able to do that and the other agent wasn't, was because I continued to deposit positive conversations into that bank account. And I didn't just come saying, hey, let's do this. I came with her data and things she could trust. So when I say something, it holds water instead of being like a colander where, okay, maybe it holds a drop or two, but the majority of it falls through that colander. Loved it though. Love that definition.
When I had in my last job, the sales company that we were with, and start by saying this book is so cool because so many different trainings and books that you read and ideas and whatever are like a branch.
Our book club chapter this week is Habit 5, seek first to understand, then to be understood. And I keep saying, I think the last habit was my favorite. I think as an instructor of communication and somebody who actually coaches people on effective communication, this might be, this is my whole presentation right here is this chapter. So I'm excited about this conversation. So I will let you take it away, Mr. Shook.
LOL. Yes. So seek first to be understood, then seek first to understand and to be understood. Starting off in this chapter, so the chapter is also called Principles of Empathic Communication. So this empathic communication that is talked about in the book, it's empathic listening is kind of getting inside another person's frame of reference. If we kind of start with that, what does he mean by that? What does that mean? Like getting inside another frame of another person's frame of reference, the empathic listening. What does that mean to you guys as you kind of read through this?
Well, for me, it's making sure that you have a clear vision of what they're trying to say, because a lot of times people will say, hey, I want to go right, but what they actually mean is I want to make 3 left-hand turns. But they tell you they want to go right, right? They tell you this is where, and so I think that when you get in there and you put yourself in their head and in their space, you find out that most people don't communicate clearly. They communicate very confusingly. And that by putting yourself in there, it gives you the opportunity to open up the doors to really understand where they're coming from.
Wow. That was really good.
To us in real estate, and I guess in any kind of sales capacity too, this just goes hand in hand with, we're always supposed to be asking questions. You can never ask too many questions. And whether that means you get, we always talk about getting to their pain. You have to go third level on their pain. Why are they selling their house? Because we want a new house. There's something there. And it's like, oh, well, we need a new house because blank, blank. Even that's not it. We got to keep asking questions. So from that same vantage point, that's kind of what that thought process is like the more somebody talks, the more their emotions come out, the more that, and that's what I've learned talking to buyers, trying to figure out what do buyers really want in a house. And I kind of just say, like kitchen wise, what do you want? What do you guys do in there? And the more you talk to them, after you get about 30, 40 minutes in, all of a sudden they start gushing and they start talking about what's really important. And so, but not only is that important, but it's also important for me to see it from their perspective.
Right.
So that's what it is, because we all have different perspectives.
Right.
They talked about the glasses thing, trying on different glasses or trying on the doctor's glasses instead of giving you the right glasses,
Mm-hmm. Right. And then how is empathic listening different from attentive or sympathetic?
I think when you're listening empathically, you're listening to understand. You're making sure that what they're saying is what they're meaning. And, when you're listening to somebody and you just want to make sure that you get exactly what they're construing to you, that's 100% empathic listening. The other listening is, you could just be having a conversation. It could be for fun, but there are a lot of times if you're listening empathically, there's a means to an end. There's a reason. Anytime else you're listening to somebody, a lot of times it's just because they're talking, right? There's not a means to an end. You're not trying to get to the answer. Like to Steve's point, I had a client who we made an offer, or we're making an offer. I've got it written and waiting on them to sign. When I first started talking to her, she was like, I need new construction. It can't be over 10 years old. I want 3-car garage. I want this, and this. And I don't want to spend more than $900,000. I was like, well, that's 1.2 mil where you're looking. So you're not even in the right price point to begin with. But the more I showed her houses, the more I talked to her, we say in this industry all the time, buyers are liars and so are sellers. They're really not liars, right? Like that's not true, but they don't always know how to communicate or realize that there could be a different path to get there. And so I think when you're listening empathetically, your objective is to meet them at their end goal or their end point. And the other listening is just a means to an end. You're having a conversation, you're having fun. Maybe somebody's had a bad day, so you're sympathetically listening. But when you leave that conversation, if you're listening through sympathetic ears, that conversation's washed from your brain. If you're using empathetic ears and you're listening to them where you're understanding them, you walk away with a conversation still going on in your head, because that conversation meant something.
Right.
What she said. And then I think we talked about it the difference between empathy and sympathy, I think.